Bam.
Hello, I'm Bryan Zack, and this is the Break It Down Show.
I love that I get to do this, and I really appreciate you coming on, Brian, because I know that a lot of us in our field are reluctant to do things, and your initial response to me was no, and I'm like, all right, I gotta make another argument here for you, and then you said yes, and that it's making my whole week to get a chance to talk to you. I've had this red circled on my calendar because it's not supposed to happen, right? But
Hmm.
because of what we do and how we approach things and what we've done together, we do need to share these stories. So thanks for coming on, man.
Oh no, I'm honored. I never did anything like this, so yeah, you probably have to prod some things out of me. I can't remember a lot of things. So it's been
Well,
27 years since Bosnia, so
I know. Yeah, the last time we really probably had a face to face was got to be 27, could even be 28 years ago because you were close to where I worked, but we just didn't have a lot of reason to interact other than the fact that we played softball. And
right.
probably the funniest thing during that time, as I said, I got it. And I misread the ball and it flew over my head. And you had to bail me out.
I don't remember. I'm sorry, but yeah,
Yeah.
things like that. Sometimes you remember, but good times.
Oh,
I
well, it
could
was so funny because I screamed out that I had it, and it was one of those balls that was straight at me. So back in the old days, Brian and I were pretty good at softball, and we played on the 165th team. One of the things I was told when I was in the 165th is that you could never put together a softball team because
Mhm.
people just wouldn't do it. And because I was such a terrible soldier, I pulled it off, and we we had a softball team. Was the 165th? Would you say out of all the units you were in, because you were already 10 years in at this point, was it a bad unit?
The bad thing about the 165th, and I could say when you deployed with the 165th, it puts you in a bad situation,
Okay.
career-wise. Case in point, like Bosnia, you go there and you're a collector, and I remember that they wanted me to collect information. You had your priority intelligence requirements that were given to you, from higher up, and you would answer those. And if I resent those directly up, because I was a direct support team and I went outside the brigade or the cavalry, the regiment I was supporting,
Yeah.
yeah, they had a sit down with me about that. So who are you really working for? You're working for us on the ground. And they were supplying my guys with uniforms, food. The supplies the 165th was not. So where's my loyalty going to be?
Yeah. 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 Well, and also you need to be relevant to that ground commander. It's nice to send reporting up, through your intel chain, but that's going to get up either way. And if that ground commander doesn't think you're relevant to them, you get hemmed up real fast.
Well, yeah, like I said, they don't want anything. They want to control what's going down on the ground there. And like everything, you send things up to higher, you know what the reactions are. I mean, sometimes we go case by case basis on some of these, whereas the overreaction from higher was just incredible in Bosnia. I mean, a
Yeah.
small incident, next thing you know, they're launching QRFs and helicopters. And they did that once trying to find me once. I was having a meeting with a source and I didn't check in. And they launched the QRF for me in Zavornik. So,
Do, when you look at the tactical side of what we did, even intel officers don't know what we do. And a lot of times
mhm.
we don't know. Like there are so many splinter jobs within counterintelligence. I was thinking about, and this, it doesn't matter what this is, Zach, the chief will know, but Formica, for example, or a strategic debriefing. These are careers within the career. I'm like, I know what the words strategic debriefing mean, but I don't know what it means to do that professionally as like your main job. Did commanders know what we did when your experience, like where they really got how to use you as a tool?
uh, the higher up you got, I was fortunate because Colonel Heron, I went to three-quarter cav. Every one of those guys from major up became generals. Every one of them.
Wow.
I
Wow.
mean, the intelligence, all of them were West Pointers. I think there was one artillery guy that he went to another school, all military background, and you really got to see brilliance in action. I mean, these guys, and another thing that was the most unique thing I ever experienced was their staff calls, because the
Mm,
commander would sit there and they would go around the room. Okay, you got this task over there. Okay, and another guy would say, "I can help you with that."
mm.
Never would happen in an MI at staff call. Never would happen. I mean, it was like,
Yeah.
just like a target of opportunity. Who's going to take the shell rounds? It was
Yeah.
just a lot of fun, and you see a lot of, it was a good time. So
And then how mobile were you guys? Did they let you guys roam? Did you have to be part of other patrols? How free
Well,
were you to go out?
Colonel Batiste, like I said, he's the one who pretty much said, you're working here and this is who you're reporting to. You're not reporting up above. It goes through us first. We'll report what needs to go up forward. So that's pretty much how it went. But Colonel Batiste, yeah, he's pretty much said it, and we still had to have 4-man patrols for a while there. And then one time, I think we relaxed it to 2-man patrols, and we went crazy with that. And then we got seen, and then we had to stop that. So.
What do you mean by you got seen? Like by us or by them?
Actually, Colonel Batiste was driving through Zvornik, and you see my 2-man. I was doing one of my meets, and happened to see one of my vehicles, and yeah, kind of had to talk about that. So we went back to 4-man, but
Yeah. Okay, but what we need to do is get out there. And was he being too restrictive, do you think?
yes, absolutely was. It was absolutely. It was. I mean, just going into Bosnia. How did you go into Bosnia? I mean, remember, did you go in through a convoy or?
Yeah, we drove in.
Okay. Did you stop in Czechoslovakia on the way in and stop there and overnight and then come across the bridge and all that stuff?
In Hungary. We stopped in Hungary.
Oh, it's Hungary. Thank you. Yeah, that's right. They have those mixed there and stuff.
Yeah, I did all that. Yeah, and we had to guard the patrol, and we sat there. And yeah, I remember. I don't know if you drove in also, but we had a vehicle attached to the wrecker, and then another vehicle that could only drive like 15 miles an hour, and so we it was horrible. It was horrible.
Yeah, I mean that was one of the things. The equipment was the best in that unit, wasn't it?
Boy, well, and in the 165th Defense, they weren't expecting to deploy en masse like that. That wasn't planned. As much as we were a tactical unit, that doesn't mean you get to have new gear all the time because we weren't going to use it. And we were getting away from that. We were going to be a strategic asset, as far as what I remember.
It's a mystery to me. Like I said, I was a direct support team. They said you're going with this unit. You train up with them at Hohenfeld. You're deploying with them. So that's pretty much
okay.
how it went. So, yeah.
So you didn't go in the big 165th parade. You actually got attached and pre-deployment were with the 3/4 cap.
We went, yes, we went. I think I did go through with some unit. I can't remember. It wasn't the 165th. I remember went across and I hooked up with Colonel Harriman and company, and we went through there. So.
And then when you get there, okay, so you were not a counterintelligence agent coming in, but you were a warrant officer by the time I met you when I was first getting there. Did you feel like you knew tactical collection operations, or were you more focused on the law enforcement side or the strategic side, or where was your strength at?
I was on the force protection side. I mean, that's what my main focus was when I got there, because initially we're there to separate the warring factions, establish his own separation.
I mean, before that, like before you even got to Germany, before when you went to warrant school, what was your specialty when you went to warrant school? Like what kind of collector were you?
Counterintelligence agent. Yeah, I went to the counterintelligence schools and enlisted guy.
But what was like your experience? Like what were you primarily steeped in when you applied to warrant officer school? Like what were you like? Were you a strategic guy, tactical? What were you doing?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, now you admit. Yeah, when I was enlisted guy, I was very lucky. I started out with a tactical unit. I was with what unit? Infantry division. I was with them, so I got to see that, and it'll hit me what unit infantry division was. And then, then I was lucky enough, and I got selected to go to 650 at them, which was NATO. And they, relatively new agent and everything. And next thing you know, you stick me out, and because I was an E7 already, I was the agent in charge of the office. And thank God I had 2 guys below me that were smarter than me and taught me quite a bit. So, and NATO was a good learning experience.
I bet. Where was that assignment physically?
Ramstein, Germany.
Okay, that is a thing about our job, right? So you become an E7 at some point, as you're entering into this new job field, and it is dramatically different than what infantry is. And you really do. I mean, you're going to learn some things, but there's how much you don't know when you're an E7 running an office. It's like you got to lean on these E5s that are below you. Were they particularly good, or?
Oh, what, the 650th?
Yeah, when you got to the new unit, yeah.
Oh yeah, it was fantastic. Like I said, it was NATO, so money was unbelievable, training, and one of the experiences I've never had. I mean, an E7, and You have to go with before the colonel over at Air Cent, because that's who you're supporting is Air Central right there.
Hmm.
And you have to negotiate your annual budget.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so you go there and say, okay, I need this much money for training, this, that, and all our TDYs. So I come up with this number, and the colonel looks at me and goes, "You can add a couple zeros to that." I mean, that was my first experience with NATO. I was like, "You got to be kidding me." So
Yeah.
yes, we traveled well, we drove well. Yeah, it was nice.
Yeah. What makes when you're looking at you know how to troop up troops, but when you're trying to troop up 97 Bravos, and again, like you might have someone who comes in who's been in the field for 5 years, but are nowhere near what your guys' mission is, and so you might
Mhm.
have someone who's got experience, but they don't have the experience they need to do your job. What is it? How do you troop up counterintelligence agents once they get to where you're at?
Well, there's some people. I mean, I'm sorry, but there's just some people that just physically they're not able. I mean, I've had one guy that stuttered terrible. I mean, he stuttered horribly.
Hmm.
Um, and this is in LA. This wasn't with the ones. I mean, this is like,
Right.
and how could I put him? I mean, we were doing technology protection. We're talking Department of Defense contractors.
Yeah.
How he made it through the course. I mean, he gave me something, and I have to be the bad guy. You
Right.
know, by no fault of his own, but I have to be the bad guy. So if
Yeah.
I utilize him as a 71 Lima, an administrative clerk, as long as he's happy, we can make it work. But his time's limited. So
When I taught at the CIFSO course, we had a guy and he had a really heavy walleye, and I'm like, look, same thing, right? I'm going to tell you right now, your eye is going to cause you some hurdles. I'm not saying you can't get past them, but
yeah.
you need to figure out how you are going to work because it's just hard to look at someone whose eye is pointed the wrong direction. And trust is so important in what we do when you're in the field that maybe
Mhm.
he's not cut out to be a field collector, but he might be a motherfucker of an ops planner or an analyst or some other kind of person in the mix. That is true, the physical aspect of it. And also, you got to have courage, like the willingness to go off the camp and be like, hey, Colonel, we only need two guys, just two. That's it. And then
Mhm.
that nobody else in the entire camp gets to do that because it is dangerous, but that's what we do. And you can't get into gunfights because there's not enough of you to get into a gunfight. So it's all got to be the moneymaker that's getting you in and out of things. Do you look at that skill set when you have new guys show up? You get a bunch of young E4s that show up. Are you trying to figure out who needs that kind of development and who needs to do something else?
Well, I mean, right away, you got to have some type of street smarts if you're going to be an operator.
Right.
Some people right away just don't have it. They've been sheltered most of their lives or whatever. And I'm you've experienced some of those over. The 165th one thing did have a variety of personalities. I
Yeah.
mean, you had a little bit of everything over there. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it was a large counterintelligence. It really was. So, but in trying to get guys up. I mean, if you're an agent in charge of an office, you got to utilize your assets the best you can. Use their abilities. So,
How much when you have an active, like we had an active mission when we were in garrison, right? A lot of units don't have that, but we had the background investigation side of things, and then red team and whatever else you could scare up, Saida, briefings, all these different jobs that keep
mhm.
you busy day to day. How do you also develop agents when they're constantly going out and giving briefings and, oh, by the way, someone's got to stand by this chow hall and have a uniform on? There's all these different things pulling on your resources. And look, we would go to Aschaffenburg and we would do our little training thing. Hup, 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 we're in the army. And I was a role player, so I got to see everybody who got the chance to do it. But I maybe played in that week.
Mhm.
I maybe played 20 roles. And
Yeah.
that's not enough. That's not enough people coming through. I should be playing 100 roles, or there should be enough of me so that everybody's getting worked. Instead, I'm talking to warrant officers, and occasionally I talk to some of the younger people, but they just weren't enough reps when we went and trained, and that was a training exercise.
Well, I'll say one thing, they really ramps up some stuff like that now because you go to these training areas and that's all they got is these role players. I mean, and they're professional role players, so it's
Yeah,
not you playing a role and trying to interrogate someone that you know. I mean, like me trying to interrogate you, I already know you had some background in this, and it's not effective. And then the
yeah,
hardest thing, of course, is trying to doing it, some type of interview through a translator, and
right.
body language and everything else because everything's different in different countries.
Yeah.
They look at things differently. So it is what it is.
When
But would
we,
I say that it was an experience, 165th?
yeah,
I mean,
it was.
I went there initially. I was with I thought the funniest thing that before deployment, all right, this is one of the pre-deployment trainings for officers, was we had Colonel Vivon at the time. Do you remember Vivon?
Yep, I do.
And he had us do this ruck march. And I mean, he basically messed up a bunch of officers. They couldn't walk for a week. You
Right.
know, what sense did that make? I mean, it had nothing to do with our mission, but there was the 165th. There was a whole lot of machismo, a whole lot of PT. When it came down to time, just, hey, let's do our, exercise our brains. No,
Yeah.
no. Yeah. Interrogation training. Nope, we're not spending a dime,
Yeah. Right.
But they did spend a lot of money for language training.
Yeah. I had no language capacity when I really got there. I mean, First Sergeant Yukmanovich did a good job and kind of gave us the basics of like what to say, like stop, I'll shoot,
Mhm.
and that kind of thing. And he had those phrases down. But if you weren't in the right setup, there wasn't a whole lot of language training or anything to do. And really, as an E4, and I've got street smarts and I'm affable and I can talk to people. I had no idea what we were supposed to do, and
Mhm.
thankfully Sergeant Dotchko was outgoing enough and had the balls to let myself and Greg McGowan. He kind of said, "This is your guys' show. You guys need to go talk to people. I'll make
Yeah.
sure that I protect you." And then we had Gina Smith, who's a female black warrant officer, like as untouchable as it gets. She was like, bring on any challenge, I will take it on. And she defended the hell out of us, but she didn't know our job at all. She was an interrogator. And so you had these teams that were really and honestly dawning of a whole new era of collection. We were inventing this shit as we went out and did it. And every team had different problems. And some teams didn't get off the camp at all. And
Mhm.
when you look at that, did you feel like you guys were prepared before you got to three-quarter calf?
Well, me personally, I'll tell you this: I did not
Yeah,
become a warrant officer till after I went to FCITIC, the Advanced Foreign Counterintelligence course,
right.
and it's a high level course. So I went in there pretty much knowing, what we had to do: develop sources, and this for some reason, I don't know why they always go talk to the police chief, go talk to the mayor. Why? They're
Hmm.
professional letters. I want the flower girl. I want the candy store shop owner.
Yeah,
Those are the people that are telling me the crap that's going on the ground. And then
right.
a lot of times we got, because my access to a lot of hotels and stuff, certain other intel agencies, we're doing sketches for them, which leads right into what I do now: sketches of buildings,
Right.
room layouts and everything else, just in case we had to do stuff. So we were pretty busy, and there was a lot of stuff that went up. We just, didn't go through brigade. So,
Yeah. If you went through FCITIC, I don't know how many people were in the unit at that time, but
mhm.
why didn't they lean on your experience on like, hey, Chief Zack, can you, teach these guys? Like we did alert assemble upload fucking 100 times. We did
Mhm.
watch the cold weather driving, video and it was ridiculous. Like we would work 7 days a week. This is before we deployed everybody. And then someone would say, "Oh, we lost the training roster for what? Did you watch the winter driving video?" And if we would watch it again, and I'm like, "Are we taking this thing seriously?" It didn't seem like the unit knew even how to set up a comprehensive and rigorous training program. The infantry stuff was great because we had the Echo 51st guys with us, but
Right.
and they could teach us how to walk around and all that stuff. And that was valuable, but for the most part, most of the training was really irrelevant. And also, by the way, the amount of work for the amount of people we had on a team was absolutely out of scope for what we could handle. Like, it was just prepping to go out, going out, writing what you went out and did, and then
Mhm.
everything else that goes on with the team. Fuck, you need more than four people to do that.
It's amazing to me. You brought up a good point about the warrant officers. I mean, Sherry Savio, I don't know if you were around when she came in, surveillance goddess. I mean, the woman is unbelievable, great surveillance. She's legendary, right?
Yeah.
This is some of the talent. I mean, some of the other officers, we had some really talented warrant officers that no way, no how. Training was done by the NCOs under whatever, with the sergeant's time. And well, and the other time was a real struggle for me,
Mm.
was because I was local right there in Darmstadt also, is that my people always got tagged to go pick up or do stuff or clean
Hmm.
a car or whatever it was. And I'm like, okay, I need them for this. How can I train them? So
Yeah.
yes, when we went there, they got trained on the ground. To answer your question, no, it was I see your pants. This is what we're going to do. This is how you do it. So, and they did a
Yeah.
great job. I
I
had
don't
some
know if you,
great NCOs.
yeah, I don't know if you recall this or not, but when I got to reception, and that was at Cambrai Fritz where your office was, you came over and said, "Hey, you're coming to my field office," and I'm like, "Fuck yes, all right here, that's great." And then,
Mhm.
whatever, 2 weeks later, I got sucked back into ops, and I was like, it broke my heart. It's like, oh man,
Yeah, well,
this, you know, and it's not your fault. It's just how the machine works. But
oh, I'm
I
telling
came
you,
that
man,
close.
it was a struggle with the NCOs and the sergeant major that was there. I can't remember call his name.
Drost.
What was his issue? I, I never understood that. I mean, it was like he was out to just hurt people, or I don't know.
Yeah.
It was a unique guy. I mean, what happened was I had some really good NCOs, and I'm trying to remember the one I had. Great guy, busts his butt for me. We get back. He goes ahead and he has to go to a leadership school. He goes to
Mhm.
leadership school, has nothing to do with me whatsoever. And they said that he looked overweight because his face was kind of round, even though he weighed in all right. But they said he looked heavy. They taped him and he was overweight. This guy would not accept. I went to rate this guy and I gave him top marks. He would not accept it. I'm
Oh,
like, I'm not. It was the biggest fight I ever had with a sergeant major, and of course I lost. Colonel was going to start with sergeant major. It
yeah.
was terrible. Basically, ended this guy's career. And I
Right.
remember the guy telling me, "How could you do this?" I'm like, I have no choice. I'm stuck between
Yeah.
a rock. I mean, yeah, it was terrible. But yeah, not a good unit.
Not a
164.
good unit. Yeah.
No.
It was the dawn of the digital age. We
Mhm.
went from, I mean, I went to the schoolhouse, we were pencil on paper, literally pencil, and we were learning how to type. That was one of the classes. Can you type fast enough?
Did
To,
you
I'm
have
gonna,
the heavy duty? You didn't have the selectrics, or did you have the manuals?
we had computers at that point, but
Oh,
we
shit.
were
Yeah,
like 2 classes in from having computers. So they were in the building, they just
yeah,
didn't use them anymore. So you look at that analog, typewriters, word processing programs, all that, to live action in the field with digital cameras, unmanned aerial vehicles, and extractable hard drives, and a laptop in a combat setting. I mean, that was you could blow a general away by taking their picture with a digital camera and walking back 10 minutes later with a picture. Like it was just like they couldn't understand the world that we had deployed in.
hmm Oh yes.
How
I
did it?
mean,
Yeah.
okay, I'm listening.
No, I was to say, how did that impact you? I mean, you'd been an agent long enough to become a warrant officer, so that's a
hmm
completely different transition for you. How was that for you?
Well, now I remember the infantry unit I was with was 8th ID, and
Okay.
they back then they brought in this thing, and it was like a map thing, for order of battle tech or
Yeah.
order of battle text. That's pretty much what it was. And this is the typical government. They paid so much money for this thing. It would come in these big connexes. It'd be all over the place, right?
Yeah.
And the screen would be about as big as my laptop here. And everything you do is like type this process, type this process. And the battlefield's so fast, by the time this thing would load, it would be past. Same thing with the technology when they initially deployed it that you're talking about. It was gee whiz cool. We weren't trained on it though. We got a really quick lowdown
Yeah.
on it and pretty much here. Now we're going to start using this. What frustrated me was the basic tool that we have for every intel thing is what? The IIR, the
Yeah.
Intelligence Information Report, which is by definition raw intelligence. All right. Somehow you write a raw intelligence report and it goes up and they hammer the shit out of it. Excuse my language.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, it's supposed to be a piece of the puzzle for some other guy too. You're
Yeah.
the analyst. No, they wanted a complete report. I mean, it was just crazy. And then
Yeah.
the other thing that was bad about that system was, I don't know if you used it enough. If you went ahead and typing a report, sneezed, got a cup of coffee, did something, and came back, it was gone.
Poof.
Yeah. And you'd be working on that for an hour, or got a misspelled word.
Oh my
Yeah,
God, it's so true.
So
I'd
I mean,
forgotten
they shove
about that.
themselves in the foot with technology, and instead, what they don't do is, in my opinion, the government just go to the contractor and say, "I want you to build this to do this." Not you build this part of it, you build that part of it. Oh, we got to get an equal rights group over here, and they've
Mhm.
got all these components they try to put together, and the shit don't work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that's what happened. I was in a special access program before this, before, I came in 165th. And same thing. They would make components, satellite technology from here, and nothing worked.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that let me just illustrate the point about the reports going away. So if you did everything properly, you
mhm.
probably wouldn't lose your report, but that was not always true. And so what you had to learn, and Sergeant Dotchko, to his credit, he taught me this. He's like, save every 2 minutes, save. Because what would happen is that you would come in, and I can't describe how bone tired you are. Like you've been out all day, you might still be drunk, but you got to write your report right now, right? Reports you have to like speed of light, boom, write that report and get it out. And so you're
Yeah,
typing and you're typing and you're typing, and maybe your partner's over your shoulder and you're writing together, and it's great, it's exciting. And then you get close to the very end, and you've been working on these things, like you said, they wanted a very comprehensive report. There was all this boilerplate you had to put in there. You're trying to insert a picture, and the camera won't always oh my god, oh my god, yeah, all the technology stuff was not always cooperative. And then poof, 4 hours of work, 3 hours of work would be gone. And you're
right.
just like, oh my God.
And it was all based to go ahead and really for them to develop association matrices and stuff like this when we sent that
Yeah.
stuff out. And I mean, misspelled words. I mean, there was so many things. I mean, I know it was a beginning, but there was
Yeah.
a lot of things that should have been thought out beforehand, especially that save thing. But I'll tell you,
Yeah.
Dashko, he did very well. I mean, that guy, yeah.
He knew
Um,
a lot. He was an awful boss, but he was a
really?
great, and yeah, he was overly mean. He was weird as fuck. I mean, just he knew his limitations. He knew that he put people off when he talked to him. But man, he knew a lot about the job. That was great. And then the funny thing was is he came back through the CIFSO course when I taught there. And I got to be like, you don't know shit. You haven't done shit. And meanwhile, he was my boss, and he knew everything. And it was funny to see him come through. By the way, as a warrant officer, I think it was the first course he went to after he had graduated. So there was, yeah, it was interesting. And I've always wanted to. I never hooked up with him again. I've always wanted to ask him about how he became so knowledgeable, because he just knew to push us out the door. And Greg and I we were folksy people, so we can go talk to people. And we just started meeting everybody. And I don't want to say we had it wired tight, but within a few months, we knew enough people that we could go meet more people, a higher level
Mhm.
people, and we ran sources. But that wasn't by anybody's design. That was because Bart knew what the fuck he was doing.
Yeah, he did. I mean, yeah. In fact, before he went to warrant officer school, he had a motorcycle. Remember?
I don't.
He bought a bike about 3, 4 months before, and he lived out in Darmstadt, outside of Darmstadt. So he wrecked his motorcycle on the autobahn about 2, 3 weeks before warrant officer school. He had his
Oh,
orders and everything. So he's working out like a madman up in Rhine-Main. Comes home, his backpack he had strapped to the back of the bike, hooked on a tire, skid, going down the road. Dude, I didn't think he was going to make it. I mean, he was road rash, right? Made
oh,
it through walk school. So yeah, give
yeah,
him an A for balls. I mean, the guy.
yeah. Well, and
That's
he
pretty
wasn't
cool.
afraid to go out. He wasn't
No,
afraid. Like, so between Gina's ability to say
Bart was his first name, wasn't it?
Bart, yeah, Bart was his
Yeah,
first name. Gina was fearless and knew to let Bart run out and get us on the road, because then we were working, and you don't get to pick your area. You just get to go out and work. And so we developed our area, and in that regard, we were a very successful team. We didn't know that going in. We hadn't really had a chance to. We knew each other, but we didn't have trust, and we didn't know what Gina's job was, and Greg and I didn't know what our job was. The only guy that really knew was Bart, and we knew we didn't like him because he was kind of an asshole.
that's a shame. My job out there pretty much was whatever the colonel wanted it to be. Yeah,
Hmm.
whatever Colonel Harriman wanted it to be that day, that was my job. He would look at, why is that moss missing? Why did this happen? And we would go and that's what we did. A lot of snoop and poop. A lot of fun. I mean, I have to say
Hmm.
we had some hair raising incidents. We ran into a lot of gory things. But my team was also we did the investigation of Zvornik 7, which I'm sure you're aware of that one. We ran on
Hmm.
that. The Asmasi Brigade, yeah, we had Kalasia, which is pretty much rubble. Yeah, we were Zvornik, where the dam was clogged.
Right.
So we had a lot of experiences there.
Did you need the colonel to tell you what he wanted you to do? I mean, at some point, you know enough that you can self-task, but you also have to satisfy the boss.
Oh no, I set my own appointments, but if Colonel Harriman had a question about something, guess what became the priority?
Okay.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
whatever the man wanted, he was going to get it. So
Who ran most of the meetings? Who was like the lead collector for you guys?
as far as
Just like yeah. I mean, who like Bart didn't really take many of the meetings. It was either Greg or myself that did most of it because he pushed us forward. But I don't know, how did your team operate? How did you guys rotate whose meeting it was?
that was my mistake in a way. And if
Mm,
there's something I could change, that would be one of them. I did a lot of the meetings, especially with, because we had problems with Osmosi Brigade, Zabornik Brigade, and they were hard soldiers. I mean, these guys were smoking, and they still wanted a war and
mhm.
everything. But I let my guys do most of the the interviews on the Muslim side. But there wasn't a whole lot of collection. We did have a pretty big area of that too, and they did a great job. But you're collecting, and what are they doing? Most of the stuff was criminal stuff you're collecting on. They stole I-4 vehicles.
Mm,
They found
mhm.
those. So
If you could change a couple of things, one or two things about how you ran the team, or how much, whatever it would be, how would you improve? Like, what would this Chief Zach tell that Chief Zach in 1996?
uh, listen first.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be it. Listen to everything that they're telling me first, and then react. You know,
Mm,
it's pretty much it. And like I said, you had to be, in a way, you almost had to be that way because let's face it, my initial team, I went in there, there was a couple of people on there who just sniveled the whole time.
yeah.
I'm glad they rotated out. You know, but what was the best thing that ever happened? I had Dave Uniger, which is a great guy.
Hmm.
And I had this translator. He was just the translator. It was a gift from God. It was named
Mm,
Milan Dusan Ilic was his name, and he came off the Nimitz aircraft carrier, and he was a Navy guy.
hmm.
So here we are in country. We haven't showered in close to a month now.
Yeah.
And this poor guy who's used to getting shower every day, and his nails done and everything, and he's with us.
Yeah.
And
Love
what
it.
I'm so proud about him is he contacted me years later, and he is actually retired. '04. He became an officer
Look at
after he
that.
left us. And he thanked me a lot for many of the things that he learned. And I said, well, positive and negative. He said, yes. So I said, yeah, there was a lot of positive, a lot of negative learned, like
Yeah.
everybody. But
Yeah, it's interesting when you walk around in garrison, you don't have much to measure yourselves up against because we don't have tabs and buttons and pins that say Pete is an expert. Like you had FCITIC, I had no idea you'd gone to FCITIC, right? That'd be
mhm.
a good thing to know so that like I could say, hey Brian, I'd like to have a mentor. Would you teach me about our job? We just don't have those things, and so like you didn't lean on you to teach us how to do more, right? Or with whichever chiefs had whatever skill set, we just didn't have that. And so I wonder, like, how many agents just don't ever develop because they don't get the reps. Because I'll tell you this, from I had the fortunate misfortune of being at the ground level all the time. So I was an E4 and I was an E5, and I worked at the ground level. And then I got out, and then I came back as a civilian, and I got to continue to go off the camp all the time. And so I just got better and better and better and better and better at field collection. And look, a lot of the modern guys have a lot of reps, but were they guided in those reps, or were they just blundering, and that whatever blunder worked became their technique, and there wasn't any sophistication to it? So I would say that it's hard to develop and know when you're like, hey, I am a competent field collector, and then what's that level above? Because this is something this is not doctrine, but I'll tell you that I got good enough that with the modern wars, I wasn't worried about placement and access. I would become the placement and access. That was my job, was to get to the people that no one else could get to.
Right.
And that allowed me to get things that no one else had. I didn't have to find an Aldrich Ames and run them. I had to become that person to that community, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah, the next level is once you get to that point. I mean, you're really having that type of interaction with them is to go ahead and get them recruited. It's hard to
Right.
go ahead and get someone to go ahead and willing to spy, against
Yeah.
their own country and the United States behalf. So, and we
How
were
long?
lucky.
Yeah.
We did that. We
Yeah.
did that, and yeah, because I went back a couple of times, and I was like, I wanted to go see the source, and guy ran, and man, the agency came down on me hard. Do not, yeah, yeah, they got him afterwards. But I mean, I developed them. I'm pretty proud of that one. Because
Yeah.
they had all the placement access. So
The how long does it take to become, like, how many years to be able to collect? And we're talking just field collection, right? Like out in the field, tactical style. How long do you think it takes before you're like, this guy's quality? I don't have. I can, as a as the guy who runs the office, I can say you can let Pete go out and do whatever he needs. Matter of fact, let him take this E4 with him because Pete's going to guide this guy. How long does it take to see that? And do you ever see it? Maybe you don't.
oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You see some guys that just gifted. I mean, mostly just personality driven. I mean, if you can sit
Yeah.
down, relax, and get a guy to talk, and they're nothing worse than going in a guy with he's got his notebook out like this, and he's writing every word, and he's staring at every move you make.
Yeah.
Putting a guy in the defense. Let him talk. Just let him talk. He's got a story to tell you. And I
Yeah.
think some of the best interrogation courses they have, because I don't know, did you go to the British interrogation course?
No, they wouldn't send me to any courses. No.
Oh,
No.
that was the biggest. I can speak for that course. I could not achieve. I could not. They put a dummy in the room, and you have to scream at this dummy for 5 minutes. Try screaming at a dummy for 5 minutes. Anything, coffee cup, just try to scream at the top of your lungs. That was the British interrogation
Not you go
technique.
screaming at me for 5 minutes straight. That's basically screaming at a dummy.
Oh wow, you really got you that you got that mad?
No, I'm just being funny. I'm being funny.
Oh, okay.
I will tell you this though. This is 100% true, and I think highly of Bart's professional ability. Right. So let me just say that for everybody listening. I think Bart is fantastic. I would love to have him on the show, but I did have to tell the girlfriend that I had. She was also in the army, and I'm like, if you see Sergeant Dotchko talking to me, and it looks like he's screaming at me, he's not. That's just his method of talking. And so,
Wow.
yeah, he was very abusive, and he struggled to hold the team together. And we had a Navy interpreter, and those guys, man, they had a full-on fight, and it wasn't a big major fight because there was no room. We were all in a little container, drinking after hours. But those guys were trying to choke each other to death, and he had a problem, and I don't know if it was stress from family or whatever else, but he ultimately he got kicked off the camp and had to go home to the flagpole and stay and work there because he was struggling to do it. And as I'm saying that, we had no tools to deal with these things. He didn't either. It was just like, here you go. You're going to go do this thing. You've been ripped up from your life that you thought you were going to have. You brought your family over to Germany for 3, and now you're gone. I mean, we've learned a lot about that in the last 20 years and how hard that is on people to deploy them. And we
Very
really
true.
just,
For a year.
yeah. And we didn't know
Right.
how long we were going to be gone either, right? It was like, we're going to go.
I mean, one of the best guys I had, Dave Cricker. I mean, remember
Yeah.
Dave Cricker? I mean,
Yeah.
great guy. He did well too. I guess he's some high muckety muck in the prison system.
That's right.
So,
That's right. In Georgia. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so you keep in contact with him. Yeah, I mean, he's another guy that, yeah, I mean, great guy, but he's, just wish he had the training.
Mhm.
We didn't keep him. That
Yeah.
was a quality soldier we should have kept. Well, we couldn't keep him because he's a young guy. He wanted to have his family. I know him and his wife, and I think they do have 2 beautiful kids, and he got his life.
Yeah.
But the Army wasn't going to give that to him. He gets
No.
the
And
German.
the Army was and probably remains bad at keeping. I left the Army 3 times. I was regular Army, and I was in the reserves, and then I was at a Department of Army.
I
And
know
I
that.
was willing to stay each time, and no one bothered to give a fuck. And I am really good at my job, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I've done it so much. When I do the math on this, maybe I'm wrong, but there's no scoreboard, so I'm just going to say this out loud. I am the most seasoned field collector the Army has produced. I'm talking tactical, boots on the ground, conflict zone collector that the Army has produced in the last 25 years because I've
Mhm.
just done it. I've been on 1,000 combat patrols, right? Why wouldn't they want to keep that ability in house and transfer that knowledge to somebody else? And there were times when I'd be willing to do that, but they don't. The Army struggles with that long-term development piece, and I think it's too hard to make a good agent to waste good talent. Like Dave Cricket was. Look, when we were E4s, he was in fantastic shape, always hard charging, ready to go. And really, the 165th, he couldn't. They couldn't handle someone who was going that fast,
No,
working that hard. They didn't know
no.
what to do with him.
Right. And it's a shame that his follow-on probably wasn't that much better. I mean,
Right.
that's the sad part about it is I don't know who manages your careers, but we talk the enlisted side. but it's kind of sad. I mean, it really
Yeah.
is. I don't know what happened to him. I think he got out right after 165th. I'm not really sure, but he had
Yeah.
enough. I mean, and you burn
Yeah.
him out. Multiple
Yeah.
deployments, not enough training. But yeah, he was a gifted man. He would have been a very good soldier for a long time.
The I want to get back to Bosnia in a second, but I'm sort of, I guess, mentoring a potentially new CI agent, and that sounds kind of nefarious. People, it's just no big deal. He's just a guy who's in the army right now, and he's put his packet in, and he's just like, hey, here's this resource. Pete has all these shows, has all this knowledge. He brings people in, and so one of the things is he's in Germany. I'll say that, and I'll stop talking about him specifically, but he's like, should I go to the field office where I'm at and engage with the senior agent there and let him know? Because that guy's got to write the letter saying, let's let this kid in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling him, hell yeah, you should go over there. But another one of our peers who's still in the army said, oh, you should never do that. There's a power dynamic there. And I'm like, fuck that. You've got to go meet the shittiest people on the earth when you do your job on a day-to-day basis. You can't be afraid to go meet some officer, some warrant officer, some NCOIC. You have to be able to go out and engage people like that. But that's just my opinion. What's your opinion? If you were trying to get into this work and you're in the army, you're talking to anybody who ever hears this question now, if they're trying to get over to CI, should they go and engage a Chief Zack who's busy as fuck, has 3 or 4 or even 5 dots on his silver bar?
I don't see why not. I mean, absolutely, I would. But then again, I mean, honestly, seen. There's one warrant officer that should have been my mentor, and he was, CW5, and I went to talk to him, and he was the biggest asshole I could recall, to a point where we almost got into a fist fight.
Hey,
the old guy was like, I'm gonna fuck you. I mean, and then you want to bring up charges. I said, a warrant officer bringing up charges. Another, I'm a CW5. I've never heard of such a thing. Yeah. No one's gonna, no warrant officer brings charge on another warrant officer. But
right.
Yeah, I mean, but the guy was a jerk. I mean, he wouldn't do anything. So it's kind of a shame that I seen warrant officers that have a lot to give, a lot to offer, but they're burnt out, or they just want to get out and they don't want to bother with it. So it all depends on the warrant officer. I mean, honestly, with your experience with Dashko, after he got his bar, would you go up to him and ask him the same thing?
I would, because I don't. Yeah, because I don't. Even back then, right? I wanted to be better than where I was right then, and I was desperate to compete with my peers and smash them into pieces. I had a real drive to be good at whatever it was that I was going to do, and that's why I like. There was Crickard and myself at the top of the PT pyramid for our peers and everything, and I was doing correspondence courses. Brian, I never lost a board I sat in front of. The 165th didn't put me in front of the subsequent boards, but I never lost a board. And when I got the notes back, it was like, that wasn't even close, So I definitely didn't fear going to a Dachko or anybody. I talked to all of the first sergeants in our battalion about going to boards, and they all mentored me in some way.
Yeah, but I mean, part of leadership is being approachable. I mean, also, I got to know what's going on with you. I mean, we're going to train you up, but you have, problems with your family life or personal life, and you're not concentrating on this stuff. Right. I need to know these things. So yeah, you have to be somewhat approachable. I got to know what's going on in your personal life, especially when you're deployed. I mean, and there's some funny shit I could tell you on deployments. I mean, my God, Uniger, that guy cracked me up that he did. I mean, all the odds of this happening. But I mean, I tell you that story offline is funny. But
let's go back to Bosnia, because you sure as hell did. So you get back from the 165th. How much time did you have left, and how long was it before you got back there in working capacity again?
6 months. I came back from Bosnia. I hit Germany. They did that PPE on me for the TB test.
Yeah.
And I came up hot. They put me on INH. I was sick for 6 months. I was like green. And as soon as I got off the stuff, they deployed my happy ass again, because I knew they had
with the 165th.
No.
Oh, okay. A new unit, but you were still in Germany.
I was still in Germany at that time, and I went with that unit. I came back. I packed my shit. Then I went to LA. Then I went back there a couple other times.
When you came back, did they put you down at the tactical level, or were you working operational or strategic? Where were you at?
I was still running the office over in Darmstadt.
I mean, when
Sally Kennedy. Remember Sally Kennedy?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, Sally Kennedy. She lasted a little bit. She was there for a short time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you went back to Bosnia, where did they have you? What did they have you do, and how close to the ground were you?
I was in Sarajevo, and I worked out of the U.S. NIC. That was where my office was at, but I was an operator. I was on the ground, safe houses type stuff.
Yeah, yeah. It's crazy all the different things you can do and all the places you can go. On our team, we got somewhere and we did basically probably the first vulnerability assessment. And again, because I had the ability to work PowerPoint, in some basic way. And I learned that basically at a BCTP. This is for the audience.
Yeah,
BCTP is just a big field problem that really agents have nothing to do with it. And if we insert ourselves too much, like the counterintelligence agents are no longer part of the script, but you still have to sit there. And so I sat there and I fucked with PowerPoint and I learned how to draw concertina wire.
right.
And so when we deployed, Bart's like, do a vulnerability assessment. And so we did. We took a bunch of pictures. I made the PowerPoint slide. And on our laptops, you could remove the screen and flip it around and put it back and push it in front of the commander. So you had control of the keyboard and they were looking at the thing. And Bart didn't even know that was possible. And he's like, whoa. And then the colonel, this is an 06, running a brigade. And he's like, wow, what the hell is this? And like, feast your eyes, and look at our, our vulnerability assessment. And then it had PowerPoint slides. And look, if you were to look at it now, you'd be like, that looks like a kindergartner did it, but not back then. Back then, it was mind blowing. And so, to take a picture and instantly put things over the picture, all that stuff we could do. And so we started getting sent out on field trips. And we went probably to 7 different places, which, as you know, we weren't there that long. And so it was like, go here. And one of those places was, I forget why, but we ended up in Sarajevo. And we were there, and you could see like the bobsled, run. We drove by that thing, and you'd see all the bullet splash marks on all the buildings and everything. And you realize like just how serious this whole thing was. And wherever we drove, we saw that violence. Houses that were blowing up and everything. It's crazy.
Well, yeah, you spent a lot of time in Sarajevo, and I think, look what happened to their library. I mean, they have pictures of that. What happened to their library was terrible.
Yeah.
And Sarajevo, like that ski run that you're talking about, I guess the story behind this is they cut it down because what happened, of course, Sarajevo sits in a bowl.
Yeah.
Serbs surrounded, artillery, everything, and just constant shelling. The stories are legendary. But in their morbid areas, they were taking people that they killed and putting them on the ski lifts and bringing them down. And finally, the people said that's enough. Some of the most horrific things, man. It really does represent man's inhumanity to man.
Right.
It really does. The things that they did to each other over what? What was really your problem?
Yeah.
I mean, we were there on the ground, and really, what was your problem? And I think the one woman was, she was another woman that worked with us. I don't know how she ended up in my vehicle, but she was a translator for one of the colonels. And I remember we were just going down the road, and here was from the Bosniak side, because to say Muslim, really, they weren't. You know what I mean?
Right.
The Bosniak side, and one of them was sitting on the corner of the road, sitting on their haunches. And she says, "See, would you want that living next to you?" I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Look like peasants." That's what the war was all about. They were considered peasants. They didn't want them around, and that was it. So, but I don't know. When's the last time you were there? You haven't been there since that time?
Yeah, not since 96. I don't think. Yeah, I've not been back. I've wanted to, but never had the opportunity.
When you go back to the areas, my old operational area up in Zvornik and Osmasi and those areas there, you see the difference now. Before this Zvornik side, it was a nicer city than Tuzla and everything else. Now Tuzla's nice, and Zvornik, the sanctions that they put on the Serbs are really looked rough, really rough. So, looked like Chicago.
Yeah. Speaking of big American cities, can we talk about LA and what you were doing there?
Yeah, with LA, I started out. I was interviewed, and I was selected to be the first commander of the LA office for foreign counter. We actually were doing technology protection in the Los Angeles office, and I got we built the office right there in Los Alamitos, and we did a lot of stuff with the FBI there. And which is initially started out, we're working with Department of Defense contractors. But again, this was another, like you're talking about the 165th. We're going there. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. This is the same shit. I'm sorry. It was the same thing. They had no technology protection. What is that? So we write something up. Well, how is that? Well, it's an Army program. Then we'd have to explain all this.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah, it was, and it's like, why did you spend the money to send my happy ass out here and give me
Yeah.
all this? But I could sit in the sun and do nothing, you know.
Yeah.
Then it finally got through, and things went very well. So
But you're explaining the exact thing. Like when I show up somewhere, so I talked to enough colonels that colonels taught me how to speak commander. And so I learned how to show up. It's like, I would like to do my capabilities brief. They don't fucking want to hear that. What they
no,
want to hear is what are you about to do for them? And like and I could predict it. Brian, I did this so often I could predict the future. And I'd look at them and I would say, here's what your peers have told me to tell you. And then I would tell them, and here's what's gonna happen. And then he's like, well shit, if you're gonna do all that stuff, see you later, go do it, you know? And then I would, and he'd be like, motherfucker, you did do it. And you did predict the future, you know? So when you show up somewhere and you're a new program and it's like force protection, technology protect, that doesn't mean anything to anybody. You know, it's like our badge in the CI world. You're like, I have a badge. And they look at it and they're like, I don't care about that. What's that badge mean to me? You know?
mm,
So these things are explaining what we do and everything. I always encourage young agents, like you have to develop authority so that you can one, take an ass chewing and know that you're right. Because you might still get your ass chewed, but you don't want to get an ass chewing for being wrong. And then two, you have to be audacious. You have to go out and perform at a level that exceeds everybody's standards. And so they leave you alone so you can define your own job.
oh, absolutely. Yeah, the thing also too, we had a problem in Bosnia was just the way their appearance. I mean, we had some very young agents, and I couldn't put them in with the police chief or a high level meeting. But I can go
Right.
and send them over to the coffee shop. I can send them over to the flower lady or someone that's overlooking. They can operate at that. It's a shame that you have to, you know, it's a rank based level. I mean,
Yeah.
or age based. I mean, now shit, I can talk to anybody at my age. So
Yeah.
so it's
But you're right,
different.
though. The Army would put an E4 in front of a colonel, you know, and expect that to go well. And it's like, you haven't even trained this person how to have a conversation. So, you
Mhm.
know, it does have to be Chief Zack, the expert, you know, who went to FCITIC, talking to these people. And then you have to justify, like, why would I put, and we'll just say Uniger, why would I put him in this spot where this is people are willing to kill each other and they just were 6 months ago. I can't fuck around and have you take these meetings. There's a real gap there between what you have to do and what and we use Dave as an example, and I don't mean to put Dave down at all, but there's a gap there in capability that you have to
Mhm.
cover somehow.
Like I said, I mean, it all depends on the age group. I mean, if I could put
Yeah.
Dave in a certain situation, but you know, you've been in meetings too, it's personally driven. I mean, I've been in meetings where they just don't like me, but they like the guy next to me. You got to be smart to go, okay,
Yeah.
and just kind of wiggle out of it, let that guy take over. Hopefully, he's smart enough to know that. But if you work together,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
those things do happen. There's some, you know, some people just don't like the way you look. I mean, just it's the way it is.
There's a lot of ego and putting down of other people's skills in our field. You know, we're all carpenters. We
Oh
all build a house.
shit.
Yes. Yes. I'm shutting up. You get what
Oh,
I'm talking
talk
about.
about
Yeah.
eating your own. I mean, my God, what is this? I mean, the testosterone level was just amazing. And it, yeah, you're right. It really was. And even against warrant officers. I mean, some of the warrant officers, like, what the? Yeah,
Yeah.
why?
But it wasn't based on the actual application of our job. It's just
Mhm,
something in the people that go to our field where they think that they're brilliant. Like, look, we're all smart. That's why we're here. But
mhm,
that's not good enough, you know. And I would say that you were physical. You were an athlete. You were an infantry. Sergeant Murray, same thing. My buddy Brian Fuller was a physical specimen, a giant. You know, we had an advantage in that we could physically apply ourselves to the problem. You know, we weren't going to get tired because we were out of shape. All these things. But if you were bookish and relying too much on smarts, you get outperformed. I mean, just that's
mhm,
just the way I looked at it. The days, like 20-hour days, like, hey Pete, go move all of our gear from this Connex to that Connex. That sounds easy, right? It's a container for everybody listening, but the
yeah,
reality is there's 1,200 pounds of gear. I've got an hour to do it, and there's no one that's going to help me because everybody else is doing something, and I'm like, okay, you know, but who else is going to do it, right? Like, you can't have, God bless, you can't have Sergeant Uter do that. He doesn't have the physicality to move that much gear, and so you have all these things that don't inform a person about what you can do. And then it gets down to it, and it's like, are you charming? Are you physically fit? You know, and there's some basic things that you have to have. What are some of the basic things that you think that you would want to, if you're going to build a good emerging agent? what are the basic characteristics you'd want to see?
Power of observation. I mean, when you walk into a gentleman's office or you're going to do an interrogation, look what he's got on. I mean, look what look at his office. Look what he has.
Yeah.
What does he find of value? I mean, you go through this whole thing with NLP and all this other stuff. I'm not going to get into all that stuff, but I mean, yeah, just like I said, be observant, be open, and listen. You got 2 ears for a reason and one mouth. So just go ahead and listen and let them talk. Like I said, I still got 3 active duty. I don't know about, I have all my sons were this. My oldest son is a Naval Academy grad. He flew jets for the Navy. He's retired now. His wife looks like she's going to make admiral.
Wow.
And if there was ever a woman that should be an interrogator, it's her.
Yeah.
Because she's so quiet and people just talk to her.
Yeah.
They spill their guts. Yeah. And she's just amazed at how people talk to her. But some people just got a gift like that. They just got this presence. So
I've either developed or I have that gift. And my girlfriend does too, where people are like, I don't know why I'm telling you this. And I'm like, it's normal.
Yeah,
people tell me things, and you just like, go ahead and do it. I don't mind. Like, I want them to get it off their chest. And I just sit back and I listen. And then I ask a couple of careful questions, not to get too involved in their stuff. And they're like, okay, thanks. Wow, I'm glad I did that. But there is a thing, and I don't know what it is, but I have that, and it's part of what makes me good at the job. Do you have that thing?
Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It all depends what the situation is. I mean, sometimes I just don't want to hear the bullshit. So
yeah, we're gonna run out of time here.
I mean, that's really something I should use. Sometimes I do cut it short. I remember it's a fault of mine. Sometimes it's like, okay, fun meters pegged.
My favorite question is silence, and I learned this in spite of myself because I always want to yap, but I just go and they talk, and then I sit back and I just let the silence create a question, and then they answer it, and they answer it with the most amazing things.
Well, there's always that awkward silence that promotes some type of reaction. So
yeah.
You don't get it every time. Yeah, another really good interrogation course, and some of you ever interview anybody that had gone through the Reed interview and interrogation course?
Nope.
Oh, the Johnny Reed interview and interrogation course was developed by Chicago police officers. This is some time back, and it's based on really 110 questions. You're going to interview this guy, and I'm going to surmise what you go through. And I was lucky, actually. NATO, I went through a phase 1 in Oberammergau, Germany, and phase 2 in England.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's when you work for NATO, that's what happened.
So it's so crazy. I'm like, I don't know anybody who did any kind of training.
I went through a lot of interrogation courses. So, anyways, I think I went through more interrogation courses than your interrogators, to be honest with you.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So, anyways, so it was developed by Chicago police officers, and it focused on 10 of the questions were thrown randomly in there, and you're looking at body movements. That's when in NLP, where's their eyes going? What's their body reaction? Stuff like this. Those are the same thing. You can apply that to everyday life too. You want to be open, you're open.
Yeah, you have to learn. Yeah, you have to learn some body language stuff, right? And then it's only like a piece of the puzzle. You just can recognize like, oh, this is a piece. Like hands above the heart. They're going to be excited in some way. If I could sense that their feet, without looking, if I could sense that their feet were off the floor, and I'm like, pay attention, Pete. This person's excited. They're going, and it's probably time for me to nudge as opposed to ask questions because they're already fired up. They're already talking. How do we keep that train rolling and let them go to wherever they want to go? And it's not if you're not a good collector, it's not comfortable to let a person to let off the reins and let that horse run and go wherever it wants to go, and just try to just barely guide them at all because they're going fast and they're not thinking, they're just emotional. And then that's when you got them, I think. I mean, that's what I'm looking for a lot of the times.
You kind of seen it when we went to Bosnia. You've seen kind of the pressure that was placed upon a lot of the teams to pick up the intelligence requirements to move forward. Can you imagine what Iraq was like? Or Afghanistan? I can't imagine what those interrogators went through. I mean, the pressure that was put on them to collect anything.
Yeah. I collected all the time out there. And you know what I did is, here's what I collected on. I self-tasked myself. I don't care what what the information requirements were, because whatever I was going to give the commander was something that he wanted. Because my ear was tuned, and I'm like, aha, this is something that he's not going to know. let me now, so I would go across the surface, and once I found something interesting, I would dive down with my questions and see if there was gold in the mine. And if there was, then I would hollow out that mine and find out everything I could about that person, and then let that person know that I valued who they were and everything else, so I could come back and talk to them again. So I didn't worry about what some person in some conference room wrote for a question. Like I always say, the worst way to find the bombs is to say, "Where are the bombs?" No matter how cool you do that, it never works.
What was it about our field that they would go, especially young guys, they would go all the way around the question, this,
Yeah,
that, and instead of going direct, say, where's the shit?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Tell me what I want to know. I
yeah.
mean, but they would flower it up and they'd look for every angle they possibly could instead of asking the question.
Well,
You know,
when it's time to ask where are the bombs, you absolutely do that, right? But you don't
Mhm.
start there. You're like, how in the world do I find where the bombs are? I guess I have to meet enough people. How do I meet people? I got to get off the can. And you have all of these problems
Of
that
course.
come way before you say, where is the shit, right?
Yeah.
Um, I also never focused on threat. And if threat showed up in terms of like an opportunity, if there was a collector around me, like someone who else was like with the army, I would say, go talk to that guy,
Mhm.
because I wanted to keep my heat stakes low and focus on all the other things the commander wasn't getting fed. And that also made me hugely valuable, not only to that fellow collector, but to the people in the town. I'm like, I don't want to put you in a spot, because talking in Afghanistan to Americans was dangerous.
Right.
And so ultimately, at one point, the Taliban called for a meeting for my buddy and I to show up to. They wanted to evaluate us, and they swore, hey, these guys are cool. They can operate in this area. You guys can talk to them. And that only happened because we didn't act like dicks. We didn't ask a bunch
Mhm.
of threat-based questions. We weren't actively hunting them, because look, no one was catching those dudes anyhow. It was hard to make dead Taliban show up. So quit fucking asking about it and
Right.
start finding out what needs to be done in town.
Yeah, you have to figure out your own parameters and own limitations in your area. I mean,
Hmm.
bottom line,
Hmm.
because you got to stay alive too.
Yeah,
If you're gonna be a collector, you got to give and take. It's a give and take thing. What I thought was the funniest thing about Bosnia was this is another 165th hit or whoever
hmm.
the hell did it. Remember the stuff they gave us for gifts for
Oh my god.
incinerating?
Yeah, yeah,
If you ever wanted to, it was one of those times you wanted to reach through the computer and just strangle the
yeah,
supply guy. It was
yeah,
like, you got to be kidding me. I
yeah.
mean, Game Boys,
Game Boys.
we're in a third world country, no batteries, no games.
Yeah.
And then
Do-
you're going to give it to him. What's going to happen to him? He's going to play it. Oh, you're friends with the American.
yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
brilliant.
Yeah. We This is another Dotchko thing that's great. Was he was such a pack rat, and he would so there's a couple things I got to say about Dotchko real quick. So he would say, "I want you to go steal that," and I'm like, I can't take someone else's gear. I'm not going to do that. And if I do and I get caught, I'm going to be like, Sergeant Dotchko told me to do it, and he's like, all right, Turner, you don't steal anything. So I didn't have to do that shit. He also said to me, because you remember, like in the army, like they would play this game, like if I can get my hands on your weapon, and he said, if I ever get my hands on your weapon, I'm gonna, Article 15. I'm like, well, if you come for my weapon, I'm gonna assume that you want to kill me, and I'm gonna start butt stroking you. And he's like, all right, I'm not gonna go after Pete's weapon, because I was just tired of that shit. They're always fucking with you.
Yeah, that's like I said, I knew Bart from a different. Bart, I knew him before he went to warrant officer school, and he was always cool with me. I mean, but then
Yeah,
again, yeah.
he probably had mellowed by then. He probably had mellowed,
Well, after you
but
smatter yourself on the Autobahn, I guess, yeah, you kind of change your attitude.
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh man, it's yeah. Think about that. Anyhow, I don't want to take too much more of your time. There's so many great stories to tell, but I would love you to give us a no shit there I was story.
About what? I
But
mean,
just CI, something in CI where like I can't believe this just happened.
oh, you got 22 years of, oh shit, I can't believe this happened. Okay, here's a good story.
Yeah.
Um, it's a funny story. Um, I was working at the U.S. NIC, and we had voice intercept staged up above Sarajevo. They were going ahead and collecting stuff, transmissions. So the one guy went ahead and he had this, they all had their own phones, and these guys were all linguists that were up there. So I get this call, and he says, apparently this guy's mom, one of the guys that was there, got a call from his son, and it was in this language and she didn't understand it. It was language he spoke, and it sounded like he was in duress, and da 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 da, and it was horrible. Could you go check on him? So they activated me. I go get this guy, right? So I'll make the long story short. The man went ahead, and because he spoke language so well, he had a girlfriend in Sarajevo. Well, they went and had some drinks, and they were, intimate.
Yeah.
And he rolled over and dialed his mother.
Oh,
yes. This was analyzed by the agency, and all the way we got him out of country because we thought he was threatened.
yeah. Oh my gosh.
Maybe I didn't tell it as good as it should. It was funny.
No, but I mean, these crazy things happen. And then I always, one of my rules is there's two rules I have when it comes to drinking. If we're drinking tea, we just keep drinking tea. I won't bring up business until the person I'm talking to wants to bring up business. Because I've learned that if I shut up and I'm patient, I get so much more done. Because the first thing I have to do is build trust. The other thing is if someone says, no matter what country you're in, even if it's Iraq or Afghanistan, if they say, you want to drink some whiskey? The answer is always yes. And you have to be willing to, in this case, it's not illegal, but it does, you don't want anybody to find out a lot of times, but you have to be willing to break the rules because humans don't fit into rule boxes. And so those are a couple of my things. Do you have any hard and fast rules that you've learned through your experience, whether it's drinking or whatever else?
Yeah, as far as drinking goes, you got to really limit that stuff. And I'm not a drinker. I'm not. I never really developed a taste for it. And some of the stuff I put to my lips in Bosnia was just because it was fermented in the barn back in the back. So I mean, some of the stuff you put to your lips. But I had NCOs for that. So
yeah, right. You need someone who can do that drinking, right? And they do it. Yeah.
Well, I would put it to my lips and stuff like that, and act like a girl, and they get a kick out of that. And the other guys.
Yeah, everybody wants their rakia to be too strong for some American guy to drink, right? That's always.
I still got a bottle of that stuff to use for bolts and things.
Yeah,
it's pretty rare.
Well, so any hard and fast rules that are not in the book that you think, oh, this is whatever, this is a thing that I learned to do in these cases.
Nothing that comes to mind. I'll be honest with you. I haven't really think about it. You got to remember, I stopped doing the intel work in 2004. I mean, I know
it's been a long time, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and now I'm very happy. I rebuild buildings, and
Yeah. What a crazy thing! What a transition, and yet it's relevant to what you do or did.
Well, it's funny how that started out because I was not doing anything. I was retired. I was done, and I had a lake house. And one of my old NCOs called up. He says, "Hey, what are you doing?" I told him, and he says, "You're going to be a fat ass. Come on down here." So I went down to Florida, and he introduced me to the world of insurance adjusting, and I just took it to another level.
That's great. Hey, I want to ask you about, this is a more modern thing, and you don't have to answer this question if you don't want to. It's not hard or nothing, but if you're not into it, you're not into it. Chinese spy balloons versus the actual Chinese espionage threat. Any comments on that at all?
I'm glad you asked about that because, people are going batshit crazy about going ahead and let's shoot this thing down and everything else. There's a lot of benefit to watching what they're trying to collect.
Yeah.
There's a lot of power in observation. So we should have shot it down right away and da-da-da. No, we wanted to, I believe, let's see what they're really trying to collect. The Chinese have been aggressive for some time. Back when I was over there in LA, the universities, need I say more? You got 29 different, I think it's 29 different embassies and I don't know how many consulates in the Los Angeles area. You got the most diverse population in the area. You got, Garden Grove, I think, is the highest Vietnamese population outside of Seoul's country. So the whole place was ripe for intelligence collection. And how many defense contractors are out there? From Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Skunk Works, all of them were out there. So it was a very productive area.
Yeah, I did jury duty the other day, and I live in Orange County, and I'm like, look at all of these ethnicities in this room. And my spy radar is going off. I'm like, I would love to work this room. I would love to just be able to just see what's going on, because.
Well, I lived in Huntington Beach, and I will tell you one thing. You want to get shut down, while we're on the topic, I don't know how much time you have. Well, ever interact with Disney on a professional
basis? Not really, no.
Oh, just to do a simple BI, a background investigation. You couldn't believe Disney. We want a letter from somebody stating that the person is not going to be carrying a weapon. He's looking for a position of duty and trust, the United States government, and he's probably going to, he's applying for the FBI,
Yeah.
and I'm doing his background investigation, and they're not giving me information because they don't want to. They don't have to.
Yeah. Yeah.
You learn to hate Disney. That was my introduction to LA. It was with a gentleman from the FBI. He was an Asian American, and I'm not going to say his name, but first thing he says, this is what's going to happen. He goes, how do you want to survive in LA? You don't screw with Disney. You don't screw with the Rand Corporation. You don't mess with those two. Yeah. Don't mess with the Rand Corporation. He says, this is an Asian tell. You're going to learn to hate Asians. I'm like, why are you telling me this? He's an Asian guy, right?
Yeah.
And he said, and that's, just stay away from Disney. So, but that was the rules.
I got one more question for you that I just got to ask. When you go to LA as a counterintelligence agent, I have to ask you, how do you legally accomplish that? Because your legal zone of work is pretty narrow, right? So you're in the FBI's world basically, and they're allowing you to work. How does that legally work for you?
That's just it. You're under the chart of the FBI, and like I said, now you've seen. I think the first year we were there, it was the struggle. That was exactly the struggle. They all this money went into building the office, bringing us over, all this stuff. I mean, just to live there. I forgot what was it where they give you additional pay for living in the high areas.
Yeah, COLA.
Thank you, COLA. I mean, the COLA and everything was incredible for that area. So they spent all this money, and we get there, and it's like they haven't even really thought out the mission yet.
Yeah.
So leave it to me. I made it up, and it worked.
That's what I'm talking about.
What else are you gonna do? I mean, like, what do you want me to do? So why not?
Yeah, this is what I do. This is how I help. Okay, great.
Yeah, it worked out pretty well. But I mean, it's again, we'd send the stuff up, and they were questioning up there. So it was a battle for about the first year. Then things went very well, and then things kind of rotated out. So.
I'll wrap it up. Do you want to ask me anything?
No, I mean, I was great talking to you. I haven't talked to you in a long time, and great talking to you. I'd like to catch up with you off camera on sometime.
Yeah. I'm hoping to come to Chicago this year. We'll see if things work out, and I'll definitely look you up if I do that.
Well, hopefully Chicago is that they're going to get a new mayor here, and hopefully things turn around because you don't want to come back.
I used to live across the street from Wrigley Field. I'm on the other side of the right field fence, just down the street from the Murphy's bleachers, just down the street from that. And it was crazy.
I in Chicago, when I go down there for meetings, they start at 8 o'clock and I leave by 10:30. And I mean, so.
Yeah. All right, man, I'm going to roll the credits. Stand by for 1 sec. I'll come right back to you. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly.